Soft snow falls over a quiet mountain town, each flake catching the pale light of dawn like a secret waiting to be told. A lone police officer stands by the frozen lake, his breath fogging in the cold air. Beside him, a German shepherd with eyes full of loyalty and sorrow. Neither of them knows that today, their lives will collide with a hidden cry for help, a child's silent signal that will change everything. This isn't just a story about rescue, it's about redemption, love, and the courage to listen when no one else does. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments, and may your day be filled with kindness, peace, and a little bit of hope. The rain had not stopped for 3 days over the small lakeside town of Windermere, Oregon, a place wrapped in mist and melancholy. The air smelled of pine and wet asphalt. Thin fog clung to the rooftops like memory refusing to fade. Near the edge of town, where old maples bowed toward the gray lake, stood a modest wooden cabin belonging to Officer Nathan Cole, a 38-year-old police officer with quiet eyes and a burdened heart. Nathan was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair the color of dark sand beginning to gray near the temples. A faint scar ran across his jaw, the souvenir of a night that had taken both his partner and his peace. 3 years earlier, a drunk driver had killed his wife and young son on a highway outside Portland. Since then, he had transferred to Windermere, a quieter town where he hoped the silence might soften the noise inside his head. He lived alone, except for his dog, Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd with black and tan fur and amber eyes that seemed to read human souls. Rex was a retired K-9, once trained for urban search and rescue. His loyalty was absolute, but like his master, he carried invisible scars. Loud noises made his ears flatten. Sudden movements made him stiffen. 2 wounded hearts, bound by loss. That morning, Nathan buttoned his navy jacket, fastened his badge, and opened the front door. The mist rolled in off the lake like breath from a sleeping giant. Rex trotted beside him, tail still and alert. "Routine patrol," Nathan murmured, patting his head. "Let's make it quick before the rain turns ugly again." The streets of Windermere were nearly empty. Rainwater dripped from power lines. Puddles mirrored the faint glow of neon signs from the coffee shop and the gas station. The town's quiet wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that felt watched. As Nathan's truck rolled down Riverside Lane, the windshield wipers swaying like metronomes, he caught a flash of motion ahead. A woman in a beige raincoat was dragging a boy across the wet sidewalk. The boy, maybe 10 years old, rail-thin, with dark tangled hair and a jacket several sizes too large, stumbled on the curb. The woman's face was sharp, pale, and weary, her jaw set in irritation rather than concern. Her name, as Nathan would later learn, was Linda Grayson, 32, a woman who had grown up in foster care and learned early to hide vulnerability behind anger. Her husband, Tom, a large man with a square face and the heavy build of a laborer, followed close behind, his eyes scanning the street like a wolf measuring distance to prey. Nathan slowed the patrol car. Through the mist, he saw the boy glance around desperately. Then, subtly, he raised his hand, held up 2 fingers, folded one down, and closed his fist. The movement was so small it could have been a nervous tick, but Nathan recognized it instantly. The international distress signal. His pulse spiked. Rex, sensing his shift, let out a low growl. Nathan flicked on the hazard lights parked by the curb and stepped out. "Excuse me," he called, his voice calm but firm. "Everything all right here?" Linda tightened her grip on the boy's arm. "Fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "My son's just being difficult." "Your son?" Nathan's eyes fell on the boy again. The child kept his head down, his lips trembling. His silence spoke louder than screams. Before Nathan could question further, Tom stepped closer, his heavy boots splashing water. "We got somewhere to be, officer. No need to make a scene." His tone was smooth but threatening, his stance the kind used by men who solve problems with fists. Nathan's hand hovered near his radio. "Mind if I see some ID?" Linda fumbled through her bag, pulling out documents, IDs, birth certificate copies, all in order. Rain gathered on Nathan's cap brim, slid down his cheek. His instinct screamed that something was wrong, but procedure tethered him. Moments later, another patrol unit arrived. Officer Daniels, a younger cop with an indifferent air, leaned from his cruiser. "Everything okay here, Cole?" "Possibly not," Nathan replied. "The kid used a distress signal." Daniels frowned, dismissive. "Could have been random. They've got paperwork, no visible injuries." He crouched and asked the boy, "You okay, buddy?" The child hesitated, then nodded slightly, a movement so slow it looked rehearsed. Daniels shrugged. "Looks fine to me." Nathan's jaw tightened. He watched as Linda tugged the boy away toward a blue sedan. The boy looked up one last time, his eyes wide, hollow, silently pleading. The car door slammed, the engine roared, and they disappeared down the street, leaving the reflection of their taillights bleeding red on the wet asphalt. Back in his vehicle, Nathan sat motionless. Rex whined softly from the passenger seat, nudging his arm. "I know," Nathan whispered. "I saw it too." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The rain thickened, blurring the world outside. He drove to the station, filed a minimal report. Possible domestic concern, no evidence found. But the words felt hollow. That night, he stood by his window overlooking the lake, watching the Grayson house across the lane. It was dark, curtains drawn tight. No laughter, no music, just a heavy silence that seemed to hum with unease. Windermere's nights were always quiet, but that night the quiet felt wrong. Around 11, as lightning flickered over the lake, Rex's ears shot up. A faint clink echoed across the street, metal against metal, then again, softer. Nathan froze. The rational part of him whispered plumbing noises, but another part, the same instinct honed from years of reading fear, said otherwise. He stepped onto the porch, flashlight in hand, rain beating on his jacket. The air smelled of earth and rust. He scanned the neighboring house, all dark. But as he turned to leave, he noticed the curtain on the second floor move ever so slightly, as if someone inside had been watching him and ducked away. When morning came, Nathan was back in uniform, dark circles under his eyes. At the diner, the waitress poured him black coffee without asking. She had seen that look before, the kind men wore when the past refused to let go. Outside, Martha Ellison, his elderly neighbor, waved from her garden across the street. Martha was 65, petite, with silver hair always tied in a loose bun and soft blue eyes that hid deep loneliness. Her husband had died in Vietnam, and she'd lived alone ever since, filling the silence with flowers. She greeted Nathan warmly. "You look like a man who wrestled with ghosts last night." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I did." She lowered her voice. "You ever hear strange noises from the Graysons' place? Like someone knocking on the walls?" Nathan stiffened. "When?" "The past few nights," she said. "But I didn't want to meddle. Folks here don't like sticking noses where they don't belong." He nodded slowly. "Thank you, Martha." As he turned to leave, she called after him, "Be careful, Nathan. Some houses hide things the rain can't wash away." Back in his cabin, he poured a second cup of coffee that went untouched. The image of the boy's eyes wouldn't fade. He opened his laptop, searched child distress signal meaning, and stared at the screen long after he knew every result by heart. Outside, the rain resumed, tapping softly on the window. Steady, insistent, like a message he could not yet decipher. Rex sat by the door, eyes fixed on the dark house across the lane. His tail was still, ears forward, every muscle tense. Nathan followed his gaze. In that moment, he knew he would not let it go. Not this time, not another child. And as thunder rolled over Windermere Lake, Officer Nathan Cole whispered, "We'll find out what's happening in there, boy." Rex answered with a low, steady growl that echoed through the cabin, a promise. By the second night, the rain had turned the streets of Windermere into a gray blur of reflections and whispers. The houses along Riverside Lane looked like sleeping beasts under the mist, their windows half-shuttered, their lights dim and secretive. Inside his cabin, Officer Nathan Cole sat by the window, with a mug of untouched coffee, his eyes fixed on the Grayson house across the road. Beside him, Rex lay curled on the rug, head resting between his paws, one ear twitching at every sound. The old grandfather clock ticked in rhythm with Nathan's heartbeat, slow, deliberate, haunted. He'd replayed yesterday's moment in his mind a dozen times, the boy's trembling hand forming the distress signal, the look in his eyes before the car door slammed shut. Nathan knew what he'd seen, but he also knew that without evidence, his words would fall like rain on stone. At 11:47 p.m., the sound came again, faint, metallic, deliberate. Clink, pause, clink. Rex lifted his head, ears rigid. Nathan muted the clock and moved closer to the window. He saw nothing but the dim porch light of the Grayson home, the yellow glow barely cutting through the fog. The curtains were drawn tight. Yet, behind that curtain, something moved. A ripple, like a hand brushing past fabric. Nathan grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. The cold bit through his jacket. Rain fell in fine needles, shimmering under the street lamp. Rex followed, his paws silent on the wet ground. They crossed the narrow road. The world seemed to hold its breath. At the fence line, Nathan crouched, listening. He caught a sound, a rhythmic thud, too soft to be hammering, too steady to be plumbing. Then, just as he strained to identify it, silence swallowed the noise whole. "Back inside, boy," he whispered to Rex, and they returned home soaked and uneasy. Nathan wrote the time in his journal, 11:47 p.m., metallic sound from Grayson residence. He didn't know why he logged it, only that something told him it mattered. Morning arrived reluctant and gray. Nathan's phone buzzed. It was Chief Holden, his superior, a tall man in his 50s with a square jaw, steel gray hair, and a voice carved by years of command. "Cole," he said, "I got your report about that kid. I read it twice. You're seeing ghosts, son. We did a welfare check. Clean record, stable household. With respect, Chief, something's wrong there." "Something's always wrong somewhere," Holden replied dryly. "You've been wound tight since you came here. Maybe step back for a bit. Take a walk, clear your head." The line went dead, leaving Nathan staring at the static hum of doubt. Later that afternoon, he drove to the local hardware store, a small, cluttered shop owned by Stanley Moore, a red-faced man in his early 60s with a crooked smile and a passion for radio gossip. "Evening, officer," Stanley greeted, leaning on the counter. "You're up early. For a Saturday. Trouble on Riverside again?" "Just looking for something," Nathan replied. "A security camera, night vision, small frame." Stanley chuckled. "You spying on raccoons or neighbors?" "Something like that." Stanley rummaged through a shelf, pulling out a compact camera kit. "This one'll see in pitch black. Folks use it for deer, but hey, ghosts too." Nathan smiled faintly. "Perfect." He paid cash, ignoring Stanley's curious stare. Back home, he climbed to the second floor and mounted the camera on the window frame, angled directly toward the Grayson house. Rex sat nearby, watching intently, tail flicking with the focus of a soldier on duty. Nathan ran the wire through the frame and connected it to his laptop. "Now we wait," he murmured. That night, Windermere was drowned in fog. The rain had eased into a mist that crept through the trees and brushed the rooftops like breath. Nathan sat at his desk, the monitor's glow flickering against his tired face. The clock ticked past midnight. The screen showed nothing but darkness and the faint shimmer of the Graysons' porch light. Then, at 12:06, a brief flash. A movement, almost too fast to catch. Nathan leaned forward. The grainy footage showed a shadow in the Graysons' living room. It moved toward the center, crouched, and vanished. He slowed the playback, enhancing the image. For a second, the figure of a man, Tom, came into focus. He knelt on the floor, lifted the edge of a large rug, and pried something open. A sliver of light glowed from beneath before being sealed again. Nathan's pulse thundered. He rewound the footage, played it 3 more times. There was no doubt. Something, or someone, was under that floor. Rex whined softly. Nathan turned and scratched his head. "You saw it too, huh?" The next morning, Nathan went to see Martha Ellison. She was pruning her rose bushes, wearing a yellow raincoat too big for her thin frame. "You're up early, Nathan," she said, smiling faintly. "Coffee?" "Not today. I need to ask, have you seen the boy again?" Her pruning shears paused midair. "The little one with the sad eyes? Not for days. Just the woman taking out trash. The man leaves early, she stays inside. Strange pair, those two." Nathan frowned. "You hear any noises?" "Every night," she whispered. "But people around here mind their own business. You should too, dear." He gave a grim smile. "I can't." That evening, he stopped by the precinct to pull old records on the Graysons. Nothing remarkable. Tom, a contractor with a minor assault charge 15 years ago. Linda, a homemaker with a note of psychological evaluation in her file, though sealed. He stared at that line for a long moment. Psychological evaluation. What for? Back home, the mist hung thicker than before. He made a pot of coffee and sat with Rex by the window again. The dog's ears were pricked toward the Grayson house. At 11:51, the sound returned, faint, metallic, rhythmic. Nathan switched to live feed on his laptop. The same shadow appeared again, bending, lifting, closing. Then, movement. For an instant, a smaller shape flickered in the corner of the screen, hunched, trembling, unmistakably human. Nathan's breath caught. "Oh, God," he muttered. "There's someone down there." He reached for his phone, but paused. If he called the police again, they'd dismiss him without question. He needed more than suspicion. He needed undeniable proof. A sharp knock startled him. Rex barked once, deep and warning. Nathan opened the door to find Mark Hensley, his old partner from Portland, now working private security. Mark was in his early 40s, dark-skinned, stocky, with a shaved head and kind eyes that carried quiet intelligence. He held up a small box. "You called, didn't you? Said you needed better gear." Nathan exhaled, relieved. "You're a lifesaver? Still chasing ghosts, Cole?" Mark joked softly. Then his face sobered. "Or is this one real?" Nathan handed him the footage. Mark watched silently, then nodded. "That's a hidden compartment. You can see the airflow distortion. Something's alive down there." "I knew it." "I'll help," Mark said. "But be careful. If you're right, these people aren't just hiding a secret. They're protecting it." As Mark left, Nathan returned to the window. Across the street, the Grayson house stood perfectly still, as if listening back. Inside, a faint flicker of movement stirred behind the curtain. Rex growled low, fur bristling. Nathan whispered, "Not yet, boy, but soon." The rain began again, soft and endless. Somewhere beyond the curtain, a child's muffled cry drifted into the night, nearly swallowed by the storm, but not enough to be missed. Nathan grabbed his notebook and wrote a single line under the date. "There's someone alive under that floor." And as the thunder rolled over Windermere, Officer Nathan Cole made up his mind. The next sound that house made would not be ignored. The next evening came heavy with clouds, the kind that seemed to press down on the earth until everything beneath it felt smaller, quieter, and watched. The lake beyond Windermere was still as glass, reflecting no light, only swallowing it. Officer Nathan Cole sat by his desk, a half-eaten sandwich untouched beside the open laptop. On the screen, the live feed from his night camera flickered softly in shades of gray. His handwriting filled the margins of a notebook beside it. Times, sounds, shapes, moments. Rex lay beside the desk, his head resting on his paws, eyes fixed on the window, as if waiting for a sign that only he could sense. It had been 2 nights since Mark brought the upgraded surveillance gear, and already Nathan's instincts screamed that something was happening beneath the Grayson floor. The child-shaped figure he had seen still haunted his mind. Every hour since, he had checked the footage, searching for patterns. Tom's movement times, when the lights flickered, when the noises came. He found one. 11:45 p.m. to 12:10 a.m. Always. He stared at the clock now. 11:38. The rain had begun again, slow and steady, the drops sliding down the glass in thin silver rivers. "Almost time," he murmured, scratching Rex's head. The dog's ears twitched. He understood tone, not words. At 11:46, movement, a shadow across the screen. Tom entered the living room, bent down, and rolled up the rug. Again, that sliver of light. Nathan zoomed in. This time, Tom lifted a tray, metal, heavy, and placed something inside the opening. When he stood, his face turned toward the window, as though sensing the lens. For a split second, their eyes met across digital distance, and Nathan's breath caught. Tom reached up, turned off the lamp, and the feed went black. The silence afterward was suffocating. Nathan replayed the footage several times, slowing each frame until one small detail caught his eye, something that rolled off Tom's hand and fell near the hatch before it closed. A glint of metal. A spoon? No, too long. A small fork, bent. He exhaled shakily. Someone was eating down there. The next morning, he printed still frames from the video, slid them into a manila folder, and drove to the precinct. Chief Holden was there early, drinking black coffee and reading the paper. His tired gray eyes looked up when Nathan entered. "You again, Cole. What is it this time?" "I've got footage," Nathan said, placing the folder on the desk. "You need to see this." Holden flipped through the photos. "Could be anything. He's lifting a floor panel, maybe storing valuables." "There's more," Nathan pressed. "There's a figure under there, a child, a small one. I saw it twice now." Holden sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You've been on thin ice since Portland, Cole. I respect what you've been through, but obsession is an investigation. You need solid evidence, not blurry shadows." Rex, waiting by the door, gave a low grumble, as if echoing Nathan's frustration. "Then give me permission to get it," Nathan said quietly. "A warrant to search that property. One night, that's all I need." Holden shook his head. "You want to get fired? Because that's how." Nathan left the precinct, pulse tight, the folder still clutched in his hand. Outside, the fog hung like breath over the streets. He leaned against the cruiser, the ache of helplessness crawling under his skin. That afternoon, he visited Martha Ellison again. Her small kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee. She wore a knitted blue sweater and spectacles that slid down her nose every time she laughed softly. "You look troubled, Nathan. Sit down before you wear a hole in my rug." He smiled faintly, obeying. "Do you still hear noises next door?" Her face grew grave. "Last night, yes. I was up reading when I heard it again. 3 knocks, then silence. Like someone was trapped." Nathan leaned forward. "You're sure?" She nodded slowly. "I've lived alone for 40 years, dear. I know when something sounds wrong." Then, with gentleness, "You remind me of my husband. He used to lose sleep worrying about everyone else's pain. It was his greatest virtue and his greatest wound." Outside, the rain began again. Nathan looked through her kitchen window toward the Grayson house, its silhouette blurred behind the downpour. "Sometimes, Martha, wounds are the only thing that keep us moving." Later that night, Nathan prepared differently. He adjusted his jacket, slipped his badge into his inner pocket, and tucked a flashlight into his belt. Rex paced near the door, tail low, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Quiet," Nathan whispered, opening the door. The night air was wet and sharp. They crossed the street through shadows, sticking close to the hedges. Nathan crouched near the Graysons' fence, camera in hand. Through the rain, faint light leaked from one window, the kitchen. He inched closer, peering through a small crack between curtains. Linda sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug, eyes hollow and distant. Her blonde hair hung limp, her face pale and worn. She looked less like a villain, and more like someone who'd forgotten how to exist. Behind her, Tom moved through the hall, carrying a tray. Nathan's heart quickened. He snapped a silent photo, zooming in. The tray held 2 small bowls and a folded blanket. Linda spoke then, her voice just audible through the storm. "You said you'd stop this, Tom." Tom froze. "You think I can stop now? After what he's done? After what he knows?" "He's just a boy," Linda whispered. "He doesn't know anything." Tom slammed the tray down, and Linda flinched. "He knew enough to wave at the cop that day. You think I didn't see?" Nathan's pulse hammered. He turned on the recorder on his phone. Every word came through muffled but clear enough. Then Rex made a low, involuntary growl. The curtain shifted. Tom's shadow turned toward the window. Nathan ducked, pulling Rex down beside him. Footsteps approached, heavy on the floor. Then the door opened. "Who's there?" Tom's voice was sharp, cutting through rain. Nathan held his breath, gripping Rex's collar. After a tense pause, the door slammed shut again. Nathan exhaled slowly, then retreated across the street, rain soaking through his jacket. Back home, he played the recording, hearing again those words. "He's just a boy." He waved at the cop. Proof, at last. But before he could celebrate, his phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "Found something. Old property blueprints show an underground cellar beneath number 81. Not on modern registry. Meet tomorrow." Nathan leaned back, exhausted but burning with resolve. Rex nudged his leg gently, as if reminding him he wasn't alone in this. "We're close, boy," Nathan murmured. "Real close." Outside, thunder rumbled over the lake. The Grayson house stood silent again. But in that silence, Nathan swore he could feel the faint rhythm of breathing, slow, steady, and terrified, from beneath its floors. He closed his notebook, wrote the last line of the night. "Tomorrow, the truth comes to light." The morning light over Windermere was pale and colorless, filtered through a sky that seemed permanently bruised by rain. Nathan Cole hadn't slept. His living room was cluttered with open files, half-drained coffee cups, and photographs of shadows that only he believed were real. Rex lay under the table, occasionally twitching in sleep, his paws jerking as if chasing something in a dream. Nathan stared at the old blueprint Mark had sent the night before, an outline of the Grayson property drawn decades earlier. The faint pencil marks showed a square room that didn't exist anymore on official records, a cellar connected by a narrow stairway under the living room floor. At 8 a.m., Nathan drove to the station with a folder full of evidence. Chief Holden wasn't there yet, so Nathan approached Detective Avery Lang, a woman in her early 40s known for her analytical mind and calm presence. Avery had shoulder-length dark brown hair, olive skin, and sharp green eyes that rarely missed detail. She had transferred from Seattle after her husband's death in a warehouse fire, a tragedy that had left her cautious but empathetic, especially toward victims of abuse. She looked up from her computer as Nathan entered. "You look like hell, Cole," she said, though her tone carried more concern than mockery. "I found proof," he said, placing the folder on her desk. Blueprints, video footage, and a recording of the couple arguing about a child. Avery flipped through the photos, her brows tightening. "You took this yourself?" "Yes. That's not exactly regulation." "I didn't have another choice," Nathan said quietly. "You know what they'll say. No warrant, no entry. But this isn't paranoia. There's a kid under that floor." Avery studied his expression, saw the same haunted determination she'd seen in grieving fathers who refused to give up hope. "All right," she said at last. "I'll take a look. But we do this by the book. You push Holden again, I'll back you." By afternoon, she returned to him with cautious optimism. "I ran the Graysons' background. Linda was institutionalized for 6 months after her first husband's death. Suicide, possible domestic abuse. Tom was discharged from construction work 2 years ago for violent behavior. They've had no official complaints since moving here, but the house, registered under a shell company, not in their names." Nathan's pulse quickened. "Then something's definitely off." She nodded. "I filed for a preliminary search warrant. If we're lucky, it clears by tonight." That night came heavy and electric, the clouds so low they looked ready to touch the trees. Nathan sat in his truck outside the Grayson house, waiting for Avery's call. His phone buzzed at 9:03 p.m. "It's approved," she said. "We're green-lighted. You, me, and a backup unit. Let's do this carefully." He grabbed his flashlight, holstered his weapon, and signaled Rex to stay alert. The dog barked once, quiet but sharp. The police convoy arrived silently. 2 cruisers, their lights off, their engines low. The lead officer, Sergeant Darius Reed, stepped out. Reed was in his late 40s, tall, African-American, with a calm authority that filled any room he entered. A Gulf War veteran turned lawman, he carried an aura of discipline and quiet compassion. "You sure about this, Cole?" he asked. "As sure as I've ever been," Nathan replied. They approached the door in formation. Rain whispered through the trees. Avery knocked sharply. "Police department, open up!" From inside, faint shuffling. Then Linda appeared, wearing a wrinkled gray robe, her blonde hair matted. "What is this?" she demanded. Avery held up the warrant. "We're authorized to search your property, Mrs. Grayson." Before she could respond, Tom appeared behind her, his expression hard and flat. "You've got no reason for this." "We have probable cause," Avery said, stepping past the threshold. "Please step aside." Tom didn't move. His jaw flexed, but after a moment, he stepped back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Go ahead. You'll find nothing." Rex growled quietly, fur bristling. The team spread out, checking each room. The air inside was thick with mildew and damp wood. The house smelled of dust and bleach, a scent Nathan recognized too well, the smell of something scrubbed too clean. In the living room, Nathan stopped near the rug. His flashlight beam glinted off a small metallic corner peeking from beneath it, the same shape from the footage. "Here," he said. Avery joined him. Reed lifted the rug carefully. Beneath lay a heavy iron panel, old and rusted. The edges were sealed with mud. "Crowbar," Reed ordered. One of the officers handed it over. As the metal groaned open, a foul stench rose, damp earth and decay. Nathan covered his mouth, heart pounding. Avery shone her flashlight into the darkness. "There's a ladder," she whispered. Nathan went first, descending slowly. The air grew colder with each rung, thick with rot. Rex barked anxiously above, pulling at his leash. At the bottom, Nathan's boots sank into wet soil. His flashlight cut through the gloom, cracked concrete walls, a low ceiling, and in the far corner, a small figure curled on the floor. "Jesus!" he breathed. "It's a boy." The child was motionless at first, thin as a shadow, his face hidden behind filthy hair. Nathan knelt beside him, checking for breath, faint but steady. Rope marks scarred his wrists. A rusted bowl and a moldy piece of bread lay beside him. Avery's voice echoed faintly from above. "Is he alive?" "Yes, barely." Nathan looked up. "Get medics, now." When they lifted the boy into the light, Linda screamed. "No, you don't understand. He was sick. He needed to stay there." She lunged forward, but Reed caught her arms, pinning her back. Tom moved next, his face red with fury. "You ruined everything," he shouted, charging. Rex leapt before Nathan could react, teeth bared, tackling the man's arm. Tom fell, howling as Reed subdued him. The chaos lasted seconds, but for Nathan, it stretched forever. He knelt beside the boy, whose eyes fluttered open just enough to see him. In that dimness, recognition flickered. Those same eyes that had looked at him through the rain days ago. The boy's lips trembled. "You came back." Nathan's throat tightened. "You're safe now?" Paramedics arrived minutes later, rushing the child to the waiting ambulance. The red and blue light strobed across the wet pavement, washing over the faces of the officers, the broken couple, and Nathan, the only one who couldn't stop shaking. As the ambulance pulled away, Avery placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Cole." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "I should have found him sooner." "You found him," she said softly. "That's what matters." Rex sat beside him, soaked, his chest rising and falling heavily. Nathan rested a hand on the dog's head, staring after the fading ambulance until its lights disappeared into the mist. For the first time in years, he felt something shift in his chest. Not peace, not yet, but the faint beginning of it. The hospital in Windermere stood at the edge of the lake, a square building of pale brick and fogged windows. When Nathan entered that morning, everything smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain-soaked pine. The halls were quiet except for the distant beeping of monitors and the squeak of nurses' shoes against linoleum. Rex waited outside the door, his fur still damp from the previous night's storm, lying obediently in the corner like a guardian who refused to rest. The boy, his name, as the doctors later confirmed, was Eli Grayson, 10 years old, lay still in a narrow hospital bed. His skin was ashen, his wrists bandaged where the ropes had bitten through. Dark bruises bloomed across his arms, but his breathing was steady now. His hair, washed for the first time in weeks, clung to his forehead in thin, damp strands. His eyes were open, though unfocused, staring at a crack in the ceiling as if afraid of closing them. Dr. Helen Waverly, a woman in her mid-50s with streaks of silver in her auburn hair, was checking Eli's vitals. She was tall, with kind brown eyes that had seen too much of human fragility to be easily shocked. "Physically, he'll recover," she said quietly. "But trauma like this doesn't heal with bandages. He hasn't spoken since he arrived, doesn't react to anyone but your dog." Nathan glanced at Rex, who was peering through the half-open door, ears perked. "Rex has a way with kids," he said softly. "He lost his handler years ago. Maybe he recognizes the same kind of hurt." Dr. Waverly gave him a long, knowing look. Children often trust animals before people. They don't expect lies from them. Later, in the small waiting area, Detective Avery Lang joined him, carrying a folder thick with reports. Her expression was tired, her green eyes dimmed by lack of sleep. "Linda's being held in psychiatric evaluation," she said. "Tom's in custody, facing multiple charges: child cruelty, unlawful confinement, attempted assault. The DA will move fast." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Did she say why they did it?" Avery shook her head. "Linda claims she was protecting him, something about punishment for disobedience. Tom says the boy wasn't his, and he didn't care what happened. It's like talking to two halves of a broken mirror, each reflecting a different kind of madness." A silence settled between them. Nathan's eyes wandered toward the window, where the morning light filtered through mist. "He's not just another case, Lang," he murmured. "He looked at me like my son used to, when he was scared of thunderstorms." Avery studied him for a long moment. "Maybe that's why you had to find him," she said. "Maybe you needed to save one you could still reach." The next few days bled into one another. Nathan visited every morning before his shift and every night afterward. Eli still wouldn't speak. He would sit up when Nathan entered, eyes alert but guarded. Sometimes he'd reach out a trembling hand to touch Rex's fur, then retreat back into silence. One evening, Nurse Clara Bennett, a cheerful woman in her early 30s with curly red hair and a quick wit, approached Nathan as he waited outside the room. "He likes when you're here," she said, adjusting her clipboard. "When you leave, he stares at the door for a while. That's something. Most kids like him. Well, they look away." Nathan smiled faintly. "Guess he knows I'm stubborn." "Maybe that's exactly what he needs," she replied. "Someone too stubborn to leave." That night, as rain tapped against the hospital windows, Nathan brought Rex inside. He sat beside Eli's bed, reading softly from an old children's book he found in the hospital library. The boy watched him in silence, his small hands clutching the blanket. When Nathan stopped reading, Rex lifted his head, resting it gently on the mattress. Eli's thin fingers brushed the dog's fur, hesitant but deliberate. Then, for the first time, his lips parted. Does he bite?" The voice was hoarse, small, as if unused for years. Nathan froze. "Only bad guys," he said with a faint smile. Eli's mouth twitched, almost a smile, not quite. Then, "I'm safe." "You're safe," Nathan assured him. For a few seconds, the air in the room felt lighter. It was the kind of moment small enough to be missed, yet heavy enough to change everything. In the following days, Eli spoke a little more, though only to Nathan. He asked short questions about Rex, about the police station, about the rain outside his window. Never about his mother, never about the basement. Nathan didn't press. Healing, he knew, came in quiet steps, not forced confessions. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, the story spread through town. The Windermere Gazette ran headlines about the boy beneath the floor. Some townsfolk sent letters of sympathy. Others whispered that Nathan had been reckless to investigate without orders. But the hospital became a strange sanctuary, a place untouched by gossip, where only the hum of machines and the quiet strength of two survivors filled the air. One evening, Nathan returned to the cabin for the first time since the rescue. He poured himself coffee and found an old photo on the shelf, a picture of his wife and son at the lake, their smiles caught in sunlight. His throat tightened. "You'd have liked him," he murmured to the empty room. "He's brave. Maybe braver than I ever was." Rex padded up beside him, pressing his head against Nathan's knee. The next morning, when Nathan entered the hospital, something was different. Eli was sitting upright, his small shoulders squared. "You came back," the boy said softly, as if testing the certainty of it. "I told you I would." Nathan smiled, pulling a chair closer. "How are you? Feeling today?" Eli looked down at his hands. "Tired, but not scared." "That's good," Nathan said. "Being tired means you're fighting. Not being scared means you're winning." Eli nodded slowly, then looked at Rex. "Can he stay with me a while?" Nathan hesitated. "Hospital rules." "I'll make it work," Nurse Clara said from the doorway, smiling. "Doctors owe me a favor." So Rex stayed. He curled up on the floor beside Eli's bed, his body warm against the sterile tile. The boy leaned down and whispered something no one could hear. Rex's tail thumped once, softly. That night, when Nathan prepared to leave, Eli spoke again. "Will you come tomorrow?" "Every day," Nathan said, "until you're ready to leave." Eli studied him, eyes uncertain. "What if they come back?" "They won't," Nathan replied gently. "But even if they did, I'd be there first." The boy nodded, clutching the blanket tighter. Nathan lingered a moment, watching him drift asleep, then stepped out into the quiet hallway. Rain was falling again, tapping against the windows like a steady heartbeat. For the first time in years, Nathan didn't hate the sound. Outside, the lights from the hospital glowed on the wet pavement, and through the fog, the faint reflection of the lake shimmered like a mirror to another life. He stood there a long time, the weight of loss and guilt slowly easing under the rhythm of the rain. Maybe this was what redemption felt like, not triumph, but peace found in the act of staying. The rain over Windermere had finally eased, leaving behind a washed-out stillness that felt almost sacred. Nathan Cole stood on the porch of his cabin, watching the gray morning lift over the lake. The air smelled of wet pine and cold earth. Behind him, Rex lay sprawled near the door, gnawing absently on a worn tennis ball. It had been nearly a week since Eli had been transferred to Child Services' temporary care facility, and the quiet in Nathan's house had grown thick again. Different from before, but heavy all the same. He hadn't wanted to let the boy go, but Dr. Waverly had assured him it was only until a permanent guardian was assigned. Still, the memory of Eli's voice, small, trembling, hopeful, echoed in his mind. "Will you come tomorrow?" And he had, every single day. That morning, as Nathan prepared to leave for the station, the phone rang. It was Detective Avery Lang, her tone brisk but threaded with fatigue. "Morning, Cole. I've got a development. Thought you'd want to hear it in person." When Nathan arrived, the precinct buzzed with quiet tension. Avery stood by the bulletin board, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Green eyes sharper than usual, she handed him a folder. "Psychiatric eval on Linda Grayson came in," she said. "She's been moved from county jail to the state facility in Salem. Doctors say she's unstable but coherent. She's asked to speak with you." Nathan frowned. "Me?" She said, "The officer who saved him. He needs to know the rest. I'll set it up if you agree." He hesitated. Part of him didn't want to see her again, the woman who had buried her son alive under her own floor. But another part of him, the part that had spent nights wondering why, needed the truth. "Set it up," he said quietly. Later that afternoon, Nathan met Chief Holden in his office. The old man leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "You're walking into this with your heart, not your badge," he warned. "You sure that's wise?" Nathan met his gaze evenly. "Sometimes the heart's the only thing that gets you through." Holden sighed. "Then go. But take Lang with you. I don't need another headline about a cop losing his temper with a suspect." 2 days later, Nathan and Avery drove to Salem under a pale sky bruised with clouds. The facility loomed on the outskirts of town, a gray concrete block surrounded by fences and barren trees. Inside, the hall smelled of bleach and resignation. A guard led them to a small interview room. Linda Grayson was already there, sitting at a metal table. She looked thinner than before, her hair cropped short, her eyes sunken and dark-rimmed. Yet there was something disturbingly calm about her, as if confinement had stripped her of hysteria, leaving only the cold center of her mind exposed. "Nathan Cole," she murmured when he entered. "You came." He sat across from her. Avery remained, by the door, silent but alert. "Why ask for me?" Nathan said. Linda studied him, fingers tracing the edge of the table. "Because you were the only one who saw him," she said softly. "The only one who looked twice. Everyone else? They just passed by." "What happened to him?" Nathan asked. "Why lock him away?" Her eyes flicked up, sharp with pain. "It wasn't meant to be like that. I thought I could fix him. He was broken?" "Broken?" Nathan echoed. She nodded slowly. "After his real father died, he stopped talking. He'd scream at night, scratch the walls. Tom said he needed discipline. I thought—" her voice cracked. "I thought love meant control. My mother used to lock me in the cellar when I cried. She said it would make me strong. I swore I'd never be like her. Nathan's stomach tightened. But you did. Tears glistened in Linda's hollow eyes. You don't understand. When you lose everything, you start hearing your past louder than your conscience. She leaned forward suddenly. Tom wanted to take him away, to sell him. I couldn't let that happen. That's why I hid him, to keep him safe. Nathan froze. Sell him to who? People Tom worked for, she whispered. He said they wanted a boy, quiet, obedient. I didn't believe him until he started talking about deals. I kept Eli downstairs because I thought if they couldn't find him, they couldn't take him. But I lost control. He started sending signals. That's when Tom found out. Avery stepped forward. Do you have names? Linda shook her head. No names, just a number. Tom kept a phone, black, no SIM, no ID. Look under the floorboards in our bedroom closet. He hid everything there. Her voice trembled. Please, don't let them find another child. As they left the facility, the air outside felt colder than before. Avery drove in silence until they hit the interstate. You think she's telling the truth? Nathan stared out the window, the landscape blurring past. For the first time, maybe she is. When they reached Windermere, night had fallen. The two of them returned to the Grayson house, now sealed with police tape. The structure loomed in the moonlight, its windows blank and lifeless. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of old decay. Rex padded behind them, tail low, nose twitching as he sniffed the floor. They entered the bedroom. The walls were stripped bare, but the faint outline of a cross still marked the plaster. Nathan knelt by the closet and began prying up the floorboards. After several minutes, he found a small, rusted lockbox. Inside were a burner phone, a stack of cash, and a slip of paper with a number scrawled in pencil. 509-321-6724. Avery glanced over his shoulder. Could be fake, or the start of something bigger, Nathan said. They bagged the evidence and returned to the precinct. While Avery began tracing the phone records, Nathan drove to the temporary care home to visit Eli. The facility was an old converted farmhouse at the edge of town, surrounded by pines and the quiet hum of crickets. Inside, Mrs. Eleanor Mayfield, the caretaker, a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair and gentle, watchful eyes, greeted him warmly. He's been waiting for you, Officer Cole, she said. Wouldn't eat his dinner till I told him you were coming. Nathan smiled faintly. That sounds like him. When he entered the room, Eli was sitting cross-legged on his bed, sketching in a small notebook. Rex bounded over immediately, earning a small laugh from the boy, the first Nathan had ever heard. Hey, partner, Nathan said, crouching beside him. What are you drawing? Eli held up the page. It was a picture of 3 figures standing by a lake. A tall man, a boy, and a dog under a wide blue sky. That's us, Eli said simply. Nathan swallowed hard. Yeah, that's us. They spent the next hour talking about small things, dogs, pancakes, what colors looked best in the sky. But when Nathan stood to leave, Eli's voice trembled. You'll come back, right? I'll always come back, Nathan said. Driving home later, the road glistening under thin fog, he thought about Linda's words. Don't let them find another child. Something deeper was unfolding, darker than he'd imagined. At a red light, his phone buzzed. A message from Avery. Number traces to an old contact in Seattle. Possible trafficking ring. We'll dig deeper tomorrow. Nathan exhaled slowly, staring at the reflection of his tired face in the windshield. The rescue of one child, it seemed, was only the beginning. Behind him, the lake shimmered under moonlight, quiet, beautiful, and hiding more secrets than the town dared to name. The days after the discovery of the phone blurred together, each one carrying the same gray light, the same uneasy quiet that hung over Windermere like fog refusing to lift. Nathan Cole hadn't slept well in a week. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Linda Grayson's trembling hands, heard her voice whisper, "Don't let them find another child." At the station, Detective Avery Lang sat at her desk, surrounded by files and printouts, her sharp green eyes scanning every line with soldier-like precision. The Seattle lead had turned out to be thin. an inactive phone registered to a storage company that didn't exist anymore. But there were other traces. Avery had found bank transfers made to Tom Grayson's name, each small enough to avoid suspicion, but together forming a pattern, payment for something recurring. When Nathan entered, coffee in one hand and a stack of reports in the other, Avery looked up. "I think I've found where the money came from," she said. "A warehouse in Tacoma. It's been empty for years, but something's been shipped out every few months under false manifests. Toys, furniture, sometimes livestock, but it's all fake paperwork." Nathan leaned against the edge of her desk. "And what do you think they're really moving?" Her voice dropped. "Children, Cole. It's a trafficking front. Linda wasn't lying." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Nathan exhaled through his teeth, the world outside the window blurring into streaks of cold light. "We need to tell Holden." "Already did," Avery said. "He's on his way." A few minutes later, Chief Holden appeared. His gray suit was wrinkled, and his weary expression suggested too many years of bad news. "Tacoma's out of our jurisdiction," he said, flipping through Avery's notes. "We'll send it to the state task force." "With respect, Chief," Nathan said, "the state won't move fast enough. You saw what happened last time. A kid could disappear in days, hours." Holden fixed him with a tired but steady gaze. "And what do you plan to do? Drive out there on your own and play hero?" "If that's what it takes." Avery spoke up before Holden could reply. "We can make it official. I'll file for joint task coordination. 2 officers, preliminary reconnaissance only. No arrests until we confirm trafficking." Holden sighed. "Lang, if you're vouching for him, I'll allow it. But one misstep, one headline about rogue cops, and both of you are done." By evening, they were already on the road. The drive to Tacoma was long, cutting through miles of pine forest and forgotten gas stations. Rex sat in the back seat, alert but calm, his amber eyes following every car that passed. The rhythmic hum of tires on wet asphalt filled the silence. "You ever think about leaving this job?" Avery asked after an hour. "Every day," Nathan said. "And then something happens that reminds me why I can't." She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's still trying to forgive himself." "Maybe I am." He turned to look at her. "You?" "I lost my husband in a warehouse fire," she said. "He went in to save someone who'd already died. For a long time, I hated him for it. Then I realized some people don't know how to stop saving others, even when it kills them." They fell silent after that. The rain returned, light but steady. The world outside the car became a blur of highway lights and reflection. When they reached Tacoma, it was well past midnight. The old warehouse stood near the docks, massive, skeletal, abandoned but not empty. One of the loading bay lights flickered faintly. Nathan parked a block away, killed the engine, and stepped out. The air smelled of salt and oil. Rex padded quietly beside him, tail low. Avery followed, flashlight in one hand, her other resting on the grip of her sidearm. They approached the fence. A padlock hung on the gate, rusted but recently oiled. Nathan cut it with bolt cutters, and they slipped inside. The building loomed like a hollow cathedral, its roof high and broken, letting streaks of moonlight fall across the floor. Inside, rows of old crates stretched into the dark. The sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere deep within. Nathan's flashlight swept across the concrete until it caught movement, a figure darting behind a column. "Police!" Nathan shouted. "Step out!" No answer. Then a faint sound, crying, small, fragile, a child's sob. They followed it to a side room. The door was locked from outside. Avery pried it open. Inside, they found a small makeshift bed, a bucket of water, and scattered crumbs of bread. No one was there now, but the blanket was still warm. "Someone was here," Avery said, voice low. Nathan scanned the walls. There were drawings, crude crayon sketches of trees, animals, stick figures holding hands. His chest tightened. "Eli used to draw like this," he murmured. "Same colors, same lines." Suddenly Rex stiffened, ears twitching. He let out a deep guttural growl and ran toward the far end of the warehouse. Nathan and Avery followed, their footsteps echoing. At the back, a metal door led outside to a fenced yard. There, A white van idled, its headlights off. A tall man was loading crates into the back. He froze when the flashlight hit him. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" Avery shouted. The man bolted. Nathan gave chase. The rain turned slick underfoot as they sprinted across the yard. Rex lunged ahead, fast and precise, knocking the man down before he could reach the fence. Nathan tackled him, cuffing his wrists. The man was in his 40s, wiry, with a shaved head and a tattoo of a serpent coiled around his neck. His breath smelled of alcohol and fear. "You got no idea what you're messing with," he spat. "You think this stops?" "With me?" Nathan pressed him against the ground. "Then start talking." But the man only grinned, blood on his teeth. Too late. They already moved them. Avery searched the van. Inside were empty cages, rope, and a list, handwritten, of first names and numbers. She handed it to Nathan, her face pale. "These aren't inventory codes. They're kids." They took the man into custody and called for Tacoma PD backup. Within the hour, the scene was swarming with officers and flashing lights. Nathan stood under the rain, exhaustion settling into his bones. One of the Tacoma officers, Lieutenant Ryan Delgado, a tall Hispanic man with a weathered face and calm authority, approached. "We'll take it from here," he said. "You two did good work, but this is bigger than local jurisdiction now." Nathan nodded, but couldn't shake the image of the child's drawings on the wall. "How many more?" he asked quietly. Delgado met his eyes. "Too many." By dawn, as they drove back toward Windmere, the first light touched the horizon. Rex slept in the back seat, muzzle twitching. Avery leaned her head against the window, eyes closed but not asleep. Nathan gripped the wheel tighter. They had pulled one thread, and already the entire fabric of something monstrous was beginning to unravel. Yet amid the weariness, one thought lingered, a promise unspoken but clear. He would not stop until every child on that list was found. As Windmere came into view through the morning mist, he whispered to himself, "No more silence." The morning after their return from Tacoma broke with an uneasy calm. The mist over Windmere Lake was thick as milk, rolling low across the water, swallowing the pine-lined shore. Nathan Cole stood at the end of his dock, hands buried in the pockets of his worn jacket, watching the fog shift like ghosts trying to take shape. Behind him, Rex trotted along the boards, his black and tan fur damp with dew, nose lifted as if he too sensed something lingering beyond the mist. Sleep had not come easy. The images from the warehouse haunted Nathan, the empty cages, the list of children's names, the man's bloodied grin. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the words again. They already moved them. He was still lost in thought when a car engine rumbled up the gravel driveway. It was Avery Lang's gray sedan. She stepped out, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, a thermos of coffee in one hand, and dark circles beneath her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "You look like hell," she said, handing him the thermos. "I could say the same," Nathan replied with a faint smile. "Any news?" Avery leaned against the railing, sipping her own coffee. "Delgado called from Tacoma. The guy we caught, his name's Craig Meller, former dock worker, 2 priors for assault. He's not talking, but they found a GPS chip in his van. Last recorded route points north, Mount Rainier foothills." Nathan frowned. "That's national park land. Plenty of places to hide." "Exactly," Avery said. "And Delgado thinks Meller wasn't lying when he said they already moved the kids. We traced one of the names on that list, Hannah Pierce, age 9, missing from Portland 3 weeks ago. There's a chance she's still alive." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Then we go." "Holden's not going to sign off on that," she said. "The feds are taking over." Nathan turned toward the lake, the wind cutting across his face. "They'll take weeks. I'm not waiting for bureaucracy to bury another child." Avery sighed. "You realize this could cost both of us our badges?" "I'm not doing this for a badge," he said. By noon, they were on the road again, this time heading north along winding forest highways. Rex sat in the back seat, alert and restless. The landscape grew wilder as they climbed, the trees denser, the air colder. Patches of snow still clung to the shadows despite spring's approach. Around 3 p.m., they stopped in the small mountain town of Everwood, a forgotten place with only one diner, a a sheriff's substation, and a few scattered cabins near the lake. The diner, Marlene's stop, smelled of bacon grease and fresh coffee. A brass bell jingled as they entered. Behind the counter stood Marlene Rivers, a sturdy woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair tied in a bun and an expression both stern and kind. Her apron was faded, her hands calloused from years of work. "Cops, huh?" she said, glancing at their badges. "You're far from home." "Just passing through," Nathan said. "We're looking for a delivery van. White, dent on the passenger door. Might have come through a few days ago." Marlene poured 2 cups of coffee without being asked. "Saw one just like that Wednesday night," she said. "Driver came in around dusk. Didn't eat. Just sat there watching the window, tapping his fingers. Gave me the creeps." "Was he alone?" Avery asked. Marlene hesitated, then lowered her voice. "No. There was a man sitting outside in another truck. Never came in. Both of them left together after 10 minutes. They drove east, toward the lake cabins." Nathan's pulse quickened. "You remember the plate?" "Didn't catch it," Marlene said, frowning. "But the second guy, he had a limp, right leg." That detail hit Nathan like a pin of ice. He remembered the arrest record. Tom Grayson had an old injury from construction work. Could he still be alive? The report said he'd been transferred to county custody. But if someone had helped him escape... They left the diner and followed the old logging road leading to the lake cabins. The path grew narrow, the forest closing in. At the far end, half hidden by birch trees, stood a weathered cabin with boarded windows and a thin column of smoke rising from the chimney. Nathan parked 100 yards away. "We go quiet," he murmured. Avery nodded, drawing her weapon. Rex stayed close, his ears flattened, eyes sharp. They approached the cabin, boots crunching softly over gravel and frost. A faint sound came from inside, a cough, low and tired. Nathan edged to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. He saw 2 figures, a man slumped in a chair and a smaller form curled on the floor near a makeshift heater. "Kid," Nathan whispered. "At least one." He gestured for Avery to circle around. On his signal, he kicked the door open. "Police! Hands up!" The man sprang to his feet, a gun flashing in his hand, but before he could aim, Rex lunged forward, knocking him down. The gun skittered across the floor. Nathan pinned him while Avery secured the child, a girl with tangled blonde hair and terrified eyes. "Hannah?" Nathan said gently. She nodded weakly, tears spilling down her face. "Please, he said they'd come back for me." "They won't," he said, voice steady. "You're safe now." The man groaned beneath him. Nathan turned him over and froze. It wasn't Tom Grayson. The man was younger, mid-30s, tall and gaunt, with a scar running from his jaw to his temple. "Name," Avery demanded. He spat blood. "You think I'm the only one? There are more. You'll never find them." Nathan cuffed him and searched the cabin. In the back room, they found a map pinned to the wall, circles drawn around several remote areas near the mountain's northern ridge. Names were written beside each circle: Eagle Point, Cold Hollow, Timberline. When backup from the local sheriff's office arrived, Nathan briefed Sheriff Wallace, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a weathered face and cautious tone. "We'll take the girl to the clinic in town," Wallace said. "You two should let the feds handle the rest." But Nathan only shook his head. "This isn't over. There are more kids out there." That night, after the chaos settled and Hannah was safe under hospital care, Nathan stood by the lake again. The moon hung low, its reflection trembling on the dark water. Avery joined him, arms crossed against the cold. "You think Tom's still out there?" Nathan nodded slowly. "I think he's part of something he doesn't even control anymore. And until we stop it, no one's safe." Rex sat between them, staring at the lake as if he too could hear something beneath its silence, the whisper of waves carrying the voices of those still waiting to be found. Snow began to fall again over Windmere as the world seemed to fold into silence. It wasn't heavy snow, just a dusting, soft flakes drifting from a pale sky, turning the pine branches white. Nathan Cole stood at the edge of the lake, boots sinking slightly into the cold, damp soil. The reflection of the mountains trembled on the water, silver and endless. Rex sat beside him, eyes alert, tail still, his breath fogging in the morning air. Behind them, Avery Lang closed the car door and approached, her scarf pulled tight against the wind. "You've been here since dawn," she said quietly. "You know I hate when you brood near water." Nathan offered a faint smile. "You should have seen it earlier. The lake looked like glass. Hard to believe how much darkness has passed through this place." Avery stood beside him, gloved hands in her pockets. "The girl's safe. That's something." He nodded. "One child. Out of how many?" "Delgado's unit hit Timberline last night," she said. 3 kids found alive, 2 men dead in a shootout. The ring's collapsing. You started something that's finally ending." Nathan exhaled slowly. He wanted to feel relief, but something inside him refused to rest. "And Tom Grayson?" Avery hesitated. "Still missing. But we found his blood near Cold Hollow. Chances are he didn't make it through the storm." Nathan's jaw clenched. He didn't know whether to grieve or feel justice in that thought. Tom was a monster, yes, but a man who'd once been human enough for a child to call him father. "Maybe that's mercy," he murmured. They turned back toward the cabin, where the rescued children had been brought for temporary shelter. The structure was old but warm, smoke curling from the chimney. Inside, the local volunteers had transformed it into a makeshift refuge. A young social worker named Leah Hart, a petite woman in her late 20s with honey brown hair and kind gray eyes, was organizing supplies near the fireplace. Her voice was soft, but carried the authority of someone used to calming frightened hearts. "Officer Cole," she greeted, smiling faintly as he stepped inside. "The children are resting. Hannah's asking for you." Nathan followed her to the back room, where Hannah Pierce sat on a cot wrapped in a wool blanket. Her face was pale, her blonde hair brushed neatly now. When she saw Nathan, her eyes lit up. "You came," she said in a small, steady voice. "Of course," Nathan said, kneeling beside her. "How's the leg?" "Better," she whispered. Then, after a pause, "I had a dream last night, about the lake. I was standing on the dock, and there was a light coming from under the water. It wasn't scary. It was beautiful." Nathan smiled faintly. "Dreams like that mean you're healing." "Do you think Eli's safe too?" she asked. "He's safe," Nathan said softly. "And he's waiting for you to get better. Maybe one day you'll meet him." As he left the room, Leah stopped him by the doorway. "She's remarkably strong," she said. "Kids like her, they break, then rebuild themselves differently, sometimes stronger than the rest of us." Nathan studied her face, noting the exhaustion hidden behind her calm expression. "You've done this a long time?" "Since I was 15, Leah replied. "I grew up in the system myself. People like you make our work possible." He gave a small nod, humbled by the quiet resilience in her tone. "Then maybe we both owe the world one more chance." Outside, Avery was standing near the Jeep, talking on her radio. "Delgado confirmed it," she said when she saw him. "They've recovered 5 more children near the northern ridge. It's over, Nathan. We got them all." Nathan glanced toward the lake again. Snowflakes clung to his lashes. "No," he said softly. "It's never really over. But maybe it's enough for now." Avery looked at him for a long moment. "You know, if you ever stop chasing ghosts, you might actually find peace." He chuckled under his breath. "Ghosts don't scare me. It's forgetting them that does." They loaded Rex into the Jeep and began the drive back toward town. The storm clouds broke apart above the mountains, spilling soft light through the mist. The road curved past the frozen pines, the world quiet except for the crunch of tires over snow. Halfway down the mountain, Avery's phone buzzed. She answered, listening in silence. When she hung up, her expression had changed, softer, almost relieved. "That was Dr. Waverly. Eli's been cleared for release from child services. He asked if you'd be there." Nathan didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the road. Finally, he said, "Let's make a stop before we turn in our report." The hospital in Windmere looked brighter this time. The snow on its roof gleamed in the sunlight. Inside, they found Eli sitting by the window, dressed in a clean sweater and jeans, a small backpack at his feet. When he saw Nathan, he grinned, the first true smile Nathan had seen from him. "Rex!" he shouted, running forward. The dog barked once, tail wagging furiously. Nathan knelt, ruffling Eli's hair. You ready to go home? Eli hesitated. Where's home? Nathan glanced at Avery, then back at him. Wherever someone waits for you with the light on. Eli thought for a moment. Then I want to go where you are. Nathan swallowed hard. Then let's go. They signed the final papers in Dr. Waverly's office. The older woman smiled knowingly. He's lucky to have you, Officer Cole, but maybe you're luckier to have him. That evening, Nathan drove back to the lake cabin. The air was crisp and still. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Eli sat cross-legged on the rug, sketching in his notebook, Rex lying beside him, with his head on the boy's knee. Avery was at the table, sorting case files for the final report, her expression softened by the firelight. You know, she said without looking up, I never thought this job would lead me to babysit a kid and a dog at the same time. Nathan smiled. It's not babysitting, it's healing. Outside, the snow began to fall again, slower this time, peaceful. Nathan stepped onto the porch, staring at the lake. The reflection of the cabin's fire shimmered across the surface, a single warm glow in the endless dark. He thought about all the nights he'd spent searching, for justice, for redemption, for something he couldn't name. And now, standing there with a boy and a dog under his roof, he realized what he'd really been searching for all along wasn't closure, it was belonging. Avery joined him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You ever wonder why you keep ending up back here? She asked. Because this place remembers everything, Nathan said. And maybe it forgives a little too. Rex barked softly behind them, and inside, Eli's laughter echoed through the cabin, a sound so full of life it almost broke Nathan's heart. He turned to Avery, a faint smile on his lips. Maybe this is it. The storm's finally over. She raised her mug. To the ones we saved. And to the ones we couldn't, Nathan replied. They clinked their mugs together, the sound small but bright against the hush of snow. For a long while, none of them spoke. They simply stood there, watching the lake as the clouds parted, revealing a pale, golden light stretching across the horizon. It was the kind of light that made promises, not of perfection, but of peace earned through pain. And as the wind swept gently over Windmere, Nathan knew that, for the first time in years, he wasn't running from the past. He was walking towards something new. Sometimes God's miracles do not come as thunder or light, but as quiet acts of courage, a man stopping his car, a child raising his hand, a loyal dog refusing to give up. Through small choices of compassion, heaven reaches down into ordinary lives and turns pain into purpose. Nathan, Eli, and Rex remind us that faith is not only found in churches or prayers, but in every moment we choose love instead of fear, hope instead of despair. If you believe that God still works miracles through people like you, share this story to remind others that no darkness lasts forever. Leave a comment to bless someone who might need hope today. And if you felt touched by this journey, subscribe for more stories of faith, love, and second chances. May God bless you, your home, and your heart. Comment Amen if you believe that light will always find its way back, even after the storm. You said,